All right. So at this point, we would like to invite the audience to ask your questions. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, and you'll be approached, given a mic. Right? Do we have questions? Meron ba nagre-raise na hand?
There's somebody there at the back.
May naka...
Yeah, somebody at the back. I saw somebody at the back.
This year lang yata.
All right.
Good morning. Thank you very much to COL Financial for organizing this event. My name is Mr. Salvador, and my question goes to Miss April. Paano ako ni Miss April yung calling the shots eh? Ang question ko lang, Miss April, are you using also yung market sentiment when you are trying to gauge the direction of the stock market? When I ask about market sentiment, I'm talking about yung Fibonacci series. Kasi you are presenting a good mga technical charts like yung moving average, yung candle. But I haven't seen any chart related to market sentiment.
Okay. Thank you for your question, Mr. Salvador. But that one is more of Juanes' area of expertise, not myself. For me, the sentiment is more of hindi naman siya talaga sentiment. It's more of if the sector is in favor or out of favor, and valuations. If the valuations are good or bad. So as far as sentiment is concerned, one of the reasons why, for example, we have not included any property stocks right now, despite them being cheap, is because nga the sentiment is expected to be bad kasi nga may oversupply pa tayo sa office leasing and sa residential. So for me, it's more of that rather than looking at the charts, because that one is the expertise of Juanes Barredo.
All right. Any other questions?
Here.
Yes, sir. We have at the front.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Alvin De Jesus. I have two questions for the speakers. Number one, after all the discussion that you've discussed, would cash be also a good position at this time? And where do you put your cash while waiting for the tides to come in? And then number two, with the decreasing yield happening, let's say with the US 10-year, which eventually could weaken the USD. I guess this next question is for Miss April. Would this be a good catalyst for liquidity or foreign fund flows to come into the Philippines?
You wanna take?
Okay, so yung sa cash, what I do is I put it sa wife ko. By no choice, kinukuha niya lahat ng cash. Biro lang. So definitely cash is also important. So at the end of the day, palaging dapat may cash ka. Usually, I recommend about 5%. So I don't usually subscribe to sa 6 months of income. I don't do that. So it's always a percent. So usually my cash is about 5%. But again, ang tendency kasi ng tao is the exact opposite eh. In times of fear, most of the time they put more, much more sa cash. So yun ang sinasabi ko na, yes, cash is important now, but kung magka-cash lang ako, I'd rather go to the bond market. Kasi ang bonds and cash, mas similar naman yung movement nila, but in the bond market, I can still produce extraordinary returns rather than just putting it in cash. Yan. Okay.
Yeah. So for cash, yeah, I think it's good. But for me, yung cash is more like enabling you to, in case nga yun binentahan yung market, then you can deploy. Because as Melvin has said, I think now is a good time. The opportunity will be there to deploy at a very good valuation. And having cash is important. Pero again, maybe in the short term, hinog na yung bonds eh. I think a year or two ago, if you had bought bonds, mawiwipso ka pa eh, talo. But now, I think increasingly people are becoming concerned about economic growth, therefore bonds are doing well. So I think, now's a good time to start buying bonds. And again, if you buy bonds, don't think about hold to maturity. Yun. There's an opportunity to trade it. Kasi nga, pag bumaba yung rates, tataas yung value. Pwede nyo nang i-trade yan. Unless you want to keep the 6% or, for Philippine bonds, you want that coupon. But if you don't, di benta nyo. I mean, you could sell a little bit naman. You don't have to keep 100% in there. And then, from there, slowly buy your equities. A weaker dollar is good for Philippine equities. A weaker dollar is good for actually all equities. I think one of the things that have happened during the past maybe 10 years, sobrang naging uso ang US. To the point that it's not only Philippine money but all Asia global money went to US equities, that their allocation to all global equity markets have gone down. So if maybe the US market goes down, you'll see fund managers reducing their allocation to the US and redeploying it all over the world, not only to Philippines, but all equity markets around the world.
Yeah, so just to add quickly also on the cash, so if we can also, you can also invest in money market funds in COL. So at least kung talagang pang timing, pang market timing lang, you wanna time it if you want. It's hard to time, of course we all know that, but if you want, we also have money market funds that at least earn you interest. If you gusto mo bibili ka next month pa, halimbawa, or you wanna tranche it over 6 months, you could place some in money markets. At least you're making yield also.
Yung kasi yung money market, yung cash kasi sa totoo lang tempting kasi siya ngayon eh. Kasi di ba nakakash ako, I'm earning what? 4% at least, di ba? So tempting siya eh. Pero remember yung temptation na yun, you're losing an opportunity. And that is when interest rate goes down, yung money mo, yung cash mo, will not earn you 4% anymore. So sayang, yun ang pinakasayang pag hindi mo na take advantage kasi sumunod ka lang sa cash pababa.
Alright. Next question? Yes.
Yes, for Melvin, which outside the US, which geographic markets do you think would be attractive over the next maybe 6 to 12 months, and as well as industry sectors?
Okay, so for me, I favor China over US. So why? Because napasin mo nga na yung dependency ng China sa US has significantly gone down already. So that's one. And despite that, noong 2024, they hit an all-time high in their export. So what is that telling you? That China was able to successfully deploy their exports already outside of US. So yung dependency nila is already smaller. So what else? So si China ngayon, pag napansin mo, yung dati, di ba, yung 21, 22, di ba, may mga balita nga na nawala si Jack Ma, no? So bakit? Kasi si China, medyo napag-initan niya yung mga companies, no? Yung mga may-ari ng companies. But look at what happened last year. Look at what happened this year. Baliktad na. So si China ngayon, in-invite na niya yung mga CEOs. Just recently, he even invited global CEOs. So what is China doing? Baliktad. He's even encouraging these companies already. So, number 3, if you look at, like, for example, if you compare, let's say, US and China, si US, ang laki ng inakyat eh. No? Si China, baliktad, ang laki ng binaba niya. So, yung valuation ni China is way more cheaper than US today. Now, si Charles asked me about AI, right? So, if you look at AI, hindi porke matalino ka, makakagawa ka na ng AI company. Kasi para magawa mo yung AI na yon, kailangan mo ng data. So, sino yung mga gumagawa ng AI? The likes of Google, Amazon, Facebook, correct? Okay, what do they all have in common? They have data. Right? Okay. Tanggalin mo yung mga companies na yan. Magbigay ka sa akin ng company na may data. Ito lalabas. Alibaba. Tencent, Meituan, JD.com, Baidu. Sila yung may data, di ba? Yet the valuation of a lot of these companies compared to the US counterpart, sobrang laki ng minura niya. So between China and US, I even favor China more. But again, having said that, never ever neglect the US because at the end of the day, that will still be your biggest market. So, ang palaging isipin mo palagi is you still employ the diversification method. Ngayon lang, mas medyo konti dito sa China. But again, later on, as the valuation gets better sa US market, huwag mong kalimutan bumalik din doon. Kasi at the end of the day, that's still your biggest market.
If I may ask a follow-up question for Sir, no? So, what your thoughts on China's property sector? Diba? Weak consumer confidence and also the, regulatory political risk that's always there.
Yes,
What are your thoughts on that?
So tama ka. So may risk pa rin, di ba? Like all markets, may risk pa rin. And for the case of China, thank you for bringing that up, may risk pa rin. And the risk there for China is still the property. So even if the property prices has already stabilized, the government has already done so many things, at the end of the day, hindi mo pa rin alam kung may surprise na naman puputok dyan. No? But again, the risk is getting smaller and smaller already on the property sector. Ang pinaka-problem ng China is really more on the consumption side. So ang problema ng mga China, ang China mismo, yung sa loob, within, they're not spending. Yun ang pinaka-problem. So that's why the bazooka, if I may use that term, the bazooka that China is going to implement is exactly to drive economic activities, is to exactly drive consumption. So doon nila ngayon ginagalaw yan. Okay, so depende kung anong ilalabas nila, but ang pinaka-baseline dyan, may ilalabas sila that will at the very least benefit the consumption in the China market.
All right, thank you. Next question. We have. Yes, sir.
Hello, good morning. My name is Vincent Orius. Question for Ma'am April. Ma'am, there seems to be an increasing tension between the United States and China over Taiwan. And if things escalate furthermore, in all probability, we will be involved. Now, do you see any risk factor exposure in the part of Philippine markets? And for Filipino investors who are into the domestic equities and bond markets, how should we best prepare for a worst-case situation that something actually happens between the two countries?
Ako, ang hirap naman ng tanong. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer eh. So, but I don't know. Maybe if yun na nga, mas defensive ang tilt, that would also help. But it's quite difficult. I don't know. I really don't know what would happen. But it could also be kasi what the US wants to happen is we buy more US arms. Diba? They're forcing countries to spend more on defense, and then syempre sila yung pinaka biggest producer of these arms. Bibili tayo sa kanya. So yun lang, but I really don't know what would happen.
Can I share? Okay, so yung yung between China and US, that will always be a threat. But if you really think about it, between China and US, si China naman hindi naman siya yung type na gusto niya magkagera eh. It's really more on the US side. Kasi ang US, ang number one na industry niya is weapons. So the more na may uncertainty, the more that countries will buy his weapon, right? But China is not like that eh. China is more on economy side. So ironic, magkakagera dyan. But it's not the nuclear conventional warfare. It's ironically what's happening now. It's the trade war. Diba? So dyan lalaban si China. So don't look at yung i-invade niya si Taiwan in the near future. In fact, notice this. Nung ginera ni Russia si Ukraine, China just stayed on the sideline. Bakit? Because China wants to see how will the world react to Russia. Anong ginawa ng mundo? Sinanction nila si Russia, correct? Now, question. Ikaw ngayon si China, meron ka nang internal problem, gusto mo pang i-sanction ka ng buong mundo? Diba? So yung likelihood na gawin niya ngayon yan, again, I'm not saying zero, but very unlikely. Now, guess what? Kung talaga nangyari yan, huwag ka na mag-alala sa Philippine equity mo. Kasi maski yung global equity mo, babagsak na rin.
Nowhere
So
to hide.
that's the least of your problem. Yung global mo, bumagsak na rin yun.
Yeah, but I think baka yung bonds
Oh.
may chance, di ba? Maging
Oh,
safe
baka yung
haven.
just may bonds. Oh, correct.
Or
Yeah.
gold. Gold, di ba?
Gold, correct, gold,
yeah,
gold,
gold might be the asset
Yeah, yeah.
class of choice.
Correct.
But yeah, I agree with you. Maybe I mean, if you watch what China does, they seem to be very strategic in what they do. Alam nila talo sila sa US, so hindi
Correct.
nila pinoprovoke. Di ba? Hindi naman, they're not like, I mean, Russia is more of a, mas mainit ang ulo nila.
Yeah.
They respond, but China is more of defensive because they know they cannot win the war anyway. I mean, nobody can beat the US when it comes to, wars because they spend so much on it, di ba? Their defense industry.
So diversification is the key, di ba? But don't worry about too much. That's the least of our concerns, di ba? Next question.
Meron doon sa taas eh.
Hi, good morning. So, due to the ongoing tariff war, which sector in the Philippine market would you think would benefit the most? And is there any specific stock? And also, as for the currency, what would be the direction of the PHP USD exchange? And should you think should we buy more US dollars? And also, lastly, can you please comment as well on the US semiconductor companies?
Okay,
April,
so,
you want to take the first two questions first?
Okay, industries, no?
Industry.
Well, kasi kami, it's more of sinong ma-affect. Yun ang tinignan namin, no? And those that are in the export industry would hurt the most, definitely. And looking at the share price movements and historically, maybe CNPF, DNL, and maybe ICTSI because of, they're into trade. Those are some bigger companies that would be affected. What's the next one?
The US dollar peso forecast or outlook.
Yeah. Okay. It's quite interesting because in the past, if you had problems like this, you would think that the US dollar would be stronger. Unfortunately, we're coming off of a strong dollar because of rate hikes. And people anticipating higher interest rates, but now that view has reversed, which is why the dollar is not strong. It has become weak actually. So that's what's different this time around. Kasi nga, we're coming off of a Fed tightening cycle. So ngayon, ang expectation, the Fed will actually cut rates more aggressively, and the dollar, instead of being stronger, is becoming weaker. But I think may mga iba initially they were thinking this would lead to even a stronger dollar, but it's not. Yun. And then
The third one is for Melvin on the US
The
semiconductors.
semiconductor. So when you talk about semiconductor, you don't, let's make it bigger. Hindi lang yung sa US. So again, semiconductor, I think, no, so definitely in the short term, that will be most affected because sila talaga yung umakyat ng malaki. Di ba? But if you look at it beyond this volatility, you should expect the semiconductor to continue to do well pa rin. No? Unfortunately, I do not have the slide now. But we have we did a study before, and okay, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people that Asia, 'di ba? Asia palagi natin sinasabi na tayo, 'di ba, na yung population natin maganda, puro bata, etc., correct? But do you know that already peaked in 2010? No, that already peaked in 2010, and by 2030, the population of the Philippines will now move to the older side na. In fact, today, the average, so for example, we have this what we call as the dependency ratio. So out of 100 na dependent sa'yo, o sino ba mga dependent sa atin? Bata at saka matanda, di ba? So in the 1950s, out of 100 na dependent sa'yo, 4 ang matanda, 96 ang bata. That was in the 1950s. Today, 15 na ang matanda, okay? And by 2050, this Philippine data, by 2050, almost 40 na ang magiging matanda. So why am I sharing you all of this? It looks like that we are a young population, but ironically, Asia will still be the fastest in terms of decline, yung tinatawag na working age population. And you know what? Who will help all of that? Pag bumagsak na yung productivity mo, it's AI who's gonna help in that productivity. So you see, yung demand for AI will continue by the simplest fact that the demographics of the world will already change. So minsan natatakot tayo na mawawala ng trabaho kasi because of AI. Okay, mag-alala. Because in the future, talagang kukonti talaga yung working age population. In fact, in the entire region ng buong mundo, there's only one region wherein the working age population is growing. Okay, so naalala ko nga, palagi kong tinatanong to. Isang beses, nagkukwento kami ni Peggy, sabi ko, okay, dati nung bata ako, maraming Koreano sa Pilipinas. Tama? O ngayon, maraming mga taga-China, correct? Okay. In the 2050, sa tingin nyo, ano marami sa Pilipinas? Africans. Magiging Africans, no? Bakit? Kasi sila na lang nag-grow yung population nila. So the rest, by 2030, lahat yan magbabagsakan na. Kasama tayo doon.
So marami pa ring trabaho.
Marami pa rin. Pero mga
Kabilang problema
Africans,
pala.
Africans
Marami pa rin
talaga.
tayong trabaho. Alright, next question. Yes, sir?
Good morning. Siguro yung pinakamalaking takeaway ko yung sinabi ni Charles at ni Melvin na life is about expectations, and Melvin gives money, cash to his wife, happy life, happy wife. Yeah. But joking aside, just like to pin down the nuance of the REITs. I think April has written that in the double barbell strategy between equities and bonds, REITs is actually not in between but somewhat better than bonds in the sense that, kasi yun ang ginawa ko sa portfolio ko eh. REITs is you still get 5 to 7% yield. Plus it's liquid because you can sell it anytime. And the withholding tax is only 10% versus 20% for bonds. So, but related to that, versus IPO prices, Phil REIT and DDMPR are down more than 50% post-IPO price. My question is, itong shakeout from the ex-POG scenario, are they still a good buy? Bagsak na bagsak, wala ka na expectation kasi you did not get in at the IPO price. But at post 50% below IPO and a yield of 7 to 8%, are they still a good option given all of this? Or we still go with the A-REITs or the C-REIT, which is the renewable energy REIT? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Alex. So sa REITs, another REIT that you did not highlight is RCR, which we like because the RCR kasi, what they did was they injected also the malls, which is showing better resilience. And aside from that, what they seem to be doing is, medyo speculation ko lang it seems like, think about it. If you're Robinson's Land, derated ka eh. No matter what you do, your earnings are going up anyway and you're derated. But, you can see the REITs because it's paying cash dividend. You're being valued properly. So, Robinson's Land natanggal sa index. But if I'm RCR, there is an opportunity for me to be added to the index. So, they already injected it. Ang tanong, how much more do they need to be injected And how do I convince fund managers to buy my REIT? If I tell them, I'm going to be part of the index because I'm going to inject a couple of billions of assets inside, which they do. I think, yun, may chance na may capital appreciation ka. And the yield is not so bad. I think it's 6 to 7%. So you have that benefit from a potential index inclusion similar to an A-REIT plus yun na nga, dividend yields of 6 to 7%. So among the REITs, yeah, that's why we still have that there.
Pwede rin naman po siya.
Alright, so RCR is the pick, sir.
RCRC REIT and RCRC REIT, yeah.
Okay, RCRC. Alright. Next question. I can't. Meron bang nag-raise ng hand?
Here, there's.
Yes, sir. Sir in the front.
Hi, good morning. I'm JM. I have a question for Miss April. Regarding dun na sa RCR, since napag-usapan na, bakit hanggang ngayon hindi pinipili yung mismong sponsor company, which is Robinson Land versus RCR? Parang tuloy-tuloy siyang binubuhusan, binibentahan, pero sobrang baba na ng valuation ng Robinson Land. Pero yung profits niya all-time high, and then yun. So
I think it has to do with the sector outlook. Because the outlook for the residential is bad. Tapos nung nag-earning siya, sinabi niya yung take-up sales mahina. So siguro lalong natakot. And then the offices nga may, di ba, right now medyo lumalabas, there's an oversupply. I think that's what's important. There is an oversupply in residential and office. And the question is, so will that reverse in 2025? We don't even need it to go back to before, but the question is, have we seen the worst? And if you look at the reports, the answer is hindi pa. Maybe another 2 to 3 years. So it's yun nga, the sentiment is bad. Ngayon, if the sentiment is bad, pero kasi 'di ba, if we rewind everything and go back to what did our professor in finance tell us? 'Di ba? Sabi niya, okay lang if you become a cash cow. Basta magbayad ka ng cash dividend, your investors will stay with you. Ang kaso, hindi naman nagbabayad ng cash dividend yung Robinsons. They do, but very little. Unlike if you're a REIT, by law, you are required to pay out, I think, 80 or 90% of income. So, na-unlock talaga yung value niya for you as an investor. Ang mga property companies kasi, for them, they're gonna keep the money because they want to grow. And you know, Robinsons is not an index stock anymore. So, unfortunately, how fund managers play is they have a bias towards index stocks because mas liquid, di ba? Yun na nga, mas pinapansin ng tao. Pag natanggal ka sa index, kawawa ka talaga. Kaya, yun na nga, lahat, mas pumupunta sila sa REITs kasi nga at least they get the yields, the dividends. So, at sure yun. Hindi yung, laki ng income. O tapos, how do I get compensated? Wala. Diba? You don't know. So, that's, I think, the reason why, investors are preferring REITs over the underlying issues.
So basically, so given the market situation today, investors can be picky. So they pick the ones that may upside din pero may dividends. Basta may dividends ako kasi 'di ba we can afford to be picky given the market situation today.
Saka yun na nga, right now, remember when we met with our institutional clients, parang nagtatanong na sila talaga ng cash div kasi alam nga nila baka hindi umakyat yung market this year kung maipit tayo, at least may cash dividend tayo, 'di ba?
Yeah. And the good thing naman kasi in the Philippine market, as you mentioned a while ago, there are so many issues, more than 20 issues.
Yeah.
Good issues, hindi yung mga third tier names. Good issues that are paying attractive dividend over 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
Right? So Yeah, so unfortunately, I think that's the all the time we have for the Q&A part of today's event.